I have reviewed the OBSBOT Talent a while back, and since then I have been using it quite a bit and discovered some things that I wasn't aware of before. So here are 5 things that you and I didn't know it could do. Let's talk about it. This video is sponsored by OBSBOT, but let me tell you a bit about the great but maybe slightly unusual way this collaboration works for the sake of transparency and so that you get an idea of how biased I am. So they're paying me to make this video, but they're leaving the content and production completely up to me. They don't tell me what to say or even what the video should be about, and I have complete creative freedom. I think OBSBOT is one of the few companies dealing with this type of collaboration or sponsorship in the best way possible. Back to the OBSBOT Talent then. Number 1 on the list is wireless control. I already knew that it's possible to connect a keyboard to the Talent via USB. What I didn't know was that it's also possible to connect a Bluetooth keyboard to it. This means it's wireless and doesn't take up any of the Talent's ports. So I bought a cheap numeric Bluetooth keyboard to test it out, and indeed it works as expected. This is super useful when the Talent is set up so that controlling it from the touchscreen isn't an option. For example, the podcast live streaming setup I have here in my studio. With the keyboard I can switch cameras, show and hide graphics, start and stop a timer, for example, and so much more. The keyboard shortcuts can be easily programmed via Talent's web interface and can be set up to perform multiple actions by pressing one key on the keyboard. One thing I did notice though is that the distance between the keyboard and the OBSBOT Talent has to be relatively small, otherwise it loses its connection. Whether that's due to the Bluetooth receiver of the OBSBOT Talent or to a weak signal from the keyboard, I'm not sure, but I suspect it's the cheap keyboard. Number 2, audio. The Talent has a mixer for controlling the audio sources. It gives you control over which audio source you want to use, volume control, and how the channels behave, like whether the audio follows the video when you switch scenes, for example, or that it's always the same audio source. But if we go to the settings menu and click the audio section, there's some more audio settings that can be changed. We can set how the audio of each type of input source behaves. We can set audio that comes in over HDMI to always on, for example, and leave audio from an RTMP stream to always off. We can always change that later if we need to. This just tells Talent what to do with the audio as a default. We can also set how we want to monitor the audio, via the Talent's headphone jack or via Bluetooth. I would recommend always monitoring via the headphone output though, and not via Bluetooth. There's always going to be latency using Bluetooth, and what you actually need is real-time monitoring, right? So don't use Bluetooth if possible. Another thing we can set here is audio delay. This is something you may want to apply if, for example, your camera is coming in over HDMI and your microphone is going into the Talent directly. The video feed will be behind on the audio due to latency over HDMI, but you want the audio to be in sync with your video, of course. That's where you'd set a delay for. In this instance, the microphone jack. The amount of delay in milliseconds varies depending on the HDMI source, like a camera, that's being used. The range goes from 0 milliseconds all the way up to 400 milliseconds. The last one I want to touch on within the audio settings is that we can choose to have the mic input signal to go out via the headphone output or via USB-C or both or none. It's great to have these options. For example, you may not want to monitor your microphone input via USB-C because that's where you're sending the program audio to, but you do want to monitor your mic signal via headphones. We can just disable the bottom one and leave the other one enabled. Something I wanted to test out is whether I could send audio via NDI from my Mackie DLZ creator to the OBSBOT Talent. So I added an NDI source and the Talent recognized my DLZ creator. However, I didn't get any audio signal. I then tested whether the Mackie was actually sending out an NDI signal by adding it as an NDI audio source in OBS, and indeed I was getting an audio signal there. I contacted OBSBOT about this to check whether I was maybe doing something wrong here, but it turns out that the OBSBOT Talent currently doesn't support an audio-only NDI feed. Hopefully they can add that possibility in the future. That would be awesome. Number 3, external displays via USB-C. We can connect an external display to the OBSBOT Talent. I find this super useful because it means I can look at the different camera angles on a larger screen, but also show my clients how it all looks. And I've found a super efficient, easy way to connect a regular or any HDMI monitor or TV to the USB-C port of the OBSBOT Talent. I picked up this cable. It's a USB-C to HDMI cable and it works like a charm. When I connect it, the Talent shows a pop-up screen with several options on what you want the external display to show. I prefer to have the clean program on the external display. But I've also seen some videos where people connected a touchscreen to the USB-C port and were able to touch control the OBSBOT Talent via the external display. Great functionality in my opinion. Number 4. In addition to the different ways the OBSBOT Talent can connect to the internet or a network, it can also act as a hotspot for other devices. Particularly useful in locations where there's only a wired connection available, but we need to have our mobile devices connected to the same network as well. And the great thing is the Talent can run the hotspot whilst it's also connected to a Wi-Fi network. Number 5, remote controller. If you own the OBSBOT Tail Air remote controller, you're about to get a lot more out of it. After a recent firmware update, it is now compatible with the OBSBOT Talent. Now, what does that mean? Well, we can now use the remote controller to switch scenes with the numbered buttons. If I double click one, it'll switch to that scene. And I can switch back. But I can hear you thinking, right, but it's only got 1, 2, and 3. So 3 will probably be the limit of possible scenes to switch between, right? Well, the answer to that is no, that's not the limit. In fact, there doesn't even seem to be a limit. Let me show you. Right now, it shows 1, 2, and 3 here right on the screen, on the first 3 scenes. But there are more scenes that I want to be able to switch to. So if I press the very top button on the remote, it basically jumps to the next 3 scenes and I can switch between those. If I press it again, it goes to the next 3 scenes, or in this case, 2. And I could keep going if I add more scenes. Once you reach the last set of scenes and you hit the button again, it will go back to the first 3 scenes. Pretty great, I think, because it makes for a very small remote switcher that you can just hold in your hand. I hope these 5 things were useful to you. There's a link to the OBSBOT Talent in the description. And if you do decide to pick one up, don't forget to use my discount code for 10% off. And if you're watching this video around Black Friday, you can get an additional 15% off and even up to 20% off on the Tail Air and Meet 2. Pretty good deals, I'd say. Please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.